Hello, and welcome to week 2 of your Liminal coaching course. I'm Mike Parker. In this session, we're going to explore accumulated stress and unprocessed subconscious material. It's important to say here that if you are suffering from acute problems such as PTSD, severe unresolved trauma, or other significant issues, then there is nothing to stop you benefiting from liminal coaching, but we would strongly recommend that you also enlist the support of a good counsellor or therapist who uses and understands somatic approaches. Liminal coaching is not a replacement for counselling or therapy. Let's start with the term stress. In the reciprocating reservoirs video that we introduced last week, we use the name to denote unprocessed, emotionally charged memories. During an average day, we will accumulate memories from experience which have more or less emotional charge of different types. Incidents which result in adverse reactions are stressful. They increase anxiety, anger, and freeze responses. By the time we reach the end of the day, depending on circumstance and how fortunate we've been, we may have quite an accumulation of these charged memories, and the negative ones all contribute to the overall level of the stress reservoir. Fortunately, we have a mechanism for draining out most of the emotional charge and also for placing the memory on the timeline of our personal history. This gives us a sense of it being in the past. I say most of the emotional charge because it is our emotional response to things that gives them value and enables us to make judgments and decisions. So the mechanism does not eradicate all the emotion, nor would we want it to, but the memory is tagged with a significantly reduced emotional signature, if you like. Let me illustrate. Somebody really annoys you during the day and you can't stop thinking about it. A friend or partner tells you to just forget it, but you can't, and you go to sleep thinking about it. During your sleep, you will probably rerun that experience, either in the clear or metaphorically while you're dreaming, in REM sleep. When you wake up the next day, you can still remember the incident, but are thinking to yourself, why on earth did I let that get to me so much? You remember the event, you know it is in the past, and you remember the feeling, but it is just a whiff, a note of the emotion. This process uses a lot of energy and happens during the REM phase of your sleep. It involves what is now known as the default mode network, or DMN. The identification of the DMN is relatively recent and hinges on the work of Rachel and Schulman at the University of Washington in St. Louis in 2012. They were doing experiments to measure how much energy the brain used doing different activities. So they had people in fMRI machines and were giving them tasks to do, such as mental arithmetic. In between those tasks, these people had nothing to do, and several started to daydream. The scientists noticed that when they began daydreaming, the amount of energy the brain was using shot up, on occasions reaching 20 times the energy consumption during conscious mental arithmetic. They discovered that many more parts of the brain started working together as a network than during task-focused thinking. Since then, a lot of research has followed, and though it is still scratching the surface, some things do seem to be evident. One of these is that it is during these periods of DMN activation, emotionally charged memories get drained of most of their charge and put onto the narrative timeline. Because this processing uses a lot of energy, the brain limits the amount of REM sleep you get during the night to around 20%. Now, if you have a significant backlog of stress, you may try to exceed that limit to process it. In that case, the brain can wake you up quite suddenly, and you may have trouble getting back to sleep. You may also succeed in exceeding the 20% allocated and wake up the next morning exhausted, even though you have slept for many hours. And that brings me to the subject of the guided relaxation recordings we use on this course. I'm going to ask you to listen to a guided relaxation recording every night while you're going to sleep for the duration of this program. Research has shown that playing these or similar relaxation recordings while you're going to sleep can dramatically increase the effectiveness of the REM sleep that you get. So, get used to listening while you're going to sleep each night. It's good for you. You can also use the guided relaxation recordings anytime you want, allowing yourself to relax and drift and dream. You can even take a nap, and it will still work. In this respect, guided relaxation is very different from meditation, which generally tends to be dissociative and requires constant attention. Guided relaxation requires the opposite, for you to relax and drift. No one is going to hit you with a stick if you nod off. Guided relaxation also produces more activity in the right hemisphere of the brain, which has more and longer neurons reaching into the emotional brain. Because of this, it is an excellent way of accessing and working with the subconscious directly. Metaphor is the language of the unconscious. Liminal coaching, guided relaxation recordings, utilize and concentrate the power of the daydream state during which the DMN is active and suggestibility increased. The carefully constructed metaphors used in these recordings offer a field within which your subconscious resources can eagerly get to work on your behalf. The first half of each guided relaxation is the same, as it reinforces the fundamental underlying theme of calm, clarity, and flow that underpins all this work. The first guided relaxation on your course is called Drift to Peace, which you can download from the link in the video transcript. Play this at night when you're going to sleep and whenever you feel like it at other times. You should always be in a relaxed environment, though, where your full conscious attention is not required and you can drift off. So not driving or operating machinery, for example. We may have a lot of unresolved material from the past dragging us down. We may have such a stressful life in the endlessly demanding modern world that we don't clear one day's emotional load before more accumulates. What we're starting to do this week is to counter that and to use deliberate techniques to boost your stress processing. Okay, so much for explanations. If you like the background information, great. If you want to get on with it, that's fine too. But bear in mind the reasons given in the course are part of the process. Your conscious mind may not be that interested in some of it, but your subconscious will be opening up its metaphorical ears and saying, I recognize this pattern. Great. Let's make maximum use of this stuff. And that is exactly what you want. Before we finish this week's video, it's essential to mention two more things. If you look back through your journal for the week, you will be able to see incidents which may have triggered you to a greater or lesser extent, made you angry, anxious, or depressed. You may well have found that the act of noticing these incidents and recording them briefly helped to make them less significant. That's because in standing back enough to write about them, you detach from them to a greater or lesser extent. So, you do have some choice over how you react to circumstances. If you decide that a particular event is a considerable threat, you will trigger the corresponding response in your emotional limbic system. and that adds more load to your stress reservoir. You can't always decide because some things are bad, but you can check in with yourself to see if the response is proportionate. Secondly, you can also have some control over what you think on. I'm talking here about the power of rumination. If you spend time thinking about everything that went wrong in the past and how awful it is, then you will add as much stress to your stress reservoir as the actual event, or near as makes not much difference. Likewise, if you are always negatively predicting the future, let me illustrate. You have a meeting coming up, it's probably going to be okay, they usually are, but you start thinking about everything that could go wrong. The disaster meeting plays over 50 times. The actual meeting is good, but you have been to 51 meetings, and 50 of them were a disaster, adding more stress to your stress load. So what can you do about rumination? Quite a lot, it turns out. And one of the most straightforward, most effective tools you can use that you carry with you all the time, wherever you are, and that is always available and always works, is your breathing. Now, I know it's incredibly annoying when you're suffering from an anxiety or panic attack and someone says to you, just breathe. And I understand the reaction to that, including the desire to slap them. Bear with me though, because breathing from your stomach, moving your diaphragm, does work because it sends basic neural messages to your amygdala saying that things are okay and it can now switch off the panic alarm. Please download the additional course resource, 3 Deep Breaths, which provides details of how effective a few deep breaths breathing from the stomach can be and why. Again, the why really matters because understanding why something works makes it much more effective in practice. This is true generally, but with things we use to regulate our minds and bodies, it is true in spades. And that just about wraps up the video for this week. Don't forget to download the audio and the other resources and keep journaling. You should continue noticing when you're feeling reactive, and from this week onwards, remembering perhaps to pause and ask, is this proportionate? Maybe you can ask this question after using the breathing technique. Both these things disrupt old patterns and put you more in control. And, of course, you can use the recording whenever you want and note how that is working for you as well. If you keep the notes, you will see the changes. That's important because this process is so natural and subtle that quite often people don't realize how much has changed, how quickly. For now, though, just download the audio, hit play for the guided relaxation, lay back and enjoy. Thanks so much for watching. See you again soon.